What's going on, guys? Welcome back to my channel. This is Leo's Nerd Talk, and today we're going to be going over Strange Harvest. So let's get into that. Hi, my name is Leo, and as I talk about the movie, TV show, video game related, or just anything nerdy, you are in the right place. And like I said, today we're talking about Strange Harvest. Without further ado, let's get into the review. Strange Harvest is a movie that had a bunch of early buzz from some film festivals last year, which basically takes a serial killer premise but makes it into this sort of documentary style where you have people being interviewed, you have kind of found footage or police cams, security footage, things like that, and kind of just make it into this whole fake documentary just revolving around this serial killer. Now, I was very excited because that premise sounds actually very interesting. I've seen a bunch of serial killer documentaries, and there are things that I don't often watch, but every once in a while one interests me enough, and I do find some enjoyment out of some documentaries, whether they're serial killer based or other topic based. I think documentaries are pretty fun to watch most of the time. So making this into a horror movie in the style of a documentary where you have actors and things like that, where it's not real but it's in that style, is very unique, and it's very thought-provoking, and it kind of shows the evolution of what we can do with horror movies and different styles and things like that. So very much intrigued me going into this one. But before I give you my thoughts about Strange Harvest, let me know what you guys thought about it in the comment section down below. Have you guys seen it yet? It is a very niche type of horror movie, so I didn't expect people to go out to it. There was only 2 people in my theater when I went to go watch it. I mean, granted, it is in the middle of the day, but with that being said, still let me know what you guys thought about it if you did see it in theaters. But starting off with my pros, I again absolutely love the concept of this movie of making a fake documentary surrounded this serial killer, and I think they did a fantastic job of really selling that idea. You really felt like these were real people being interviewed for a documentary that was going to be published to Netflix or Hulu or something like that, where it was going to be out in a big streaming service for people to watch, that's based off of a true story. You have victims, you have witnesses, police officers, detectives, you get all this kind of found footage stuff with security cameras, cop body cams, all these different things. Even at one point there's like a girl who's like a YouTuber, so we get some footage from her like YouTube channel or something like that. So I think they very, very much sold that idea where you're watching this, you start to question yourself, like, hey, is this real? This feels a little real. I thought I was walking into a movie that was supposed to be like a documentary, but this feels a bit eerie, a bit weird, a bit too real. And you do, again, definitely get sold on that idea. So I think it's a very unique concept, a very interesting thing to do, where we take a horror movie and make it into a documentary. Now, do I think this is going to be revolutionary and a bunch of horror movies are going to start doing a documentary style? No, not really, but I do think it's something to kind of consider when it comes to making horror movies that are a little bit more original, different style. It doesn't feel like all the same thing, because in one sense of it, if we took this serial killer story and put it into the kind of generic formula of what a serial killer whodunit type of horror movie would be like, it could come off as somewhat kind of generic. So this definitely puts some new flavor to it and makes it a little bit more unique and something that's a little more niche to watch, especially for people that love these types of true crime serial killer documentary style stuff, or just likes true crime in general. This is definitely a movie that's going to be for you, and I think they sell you on that aspect again. So it's very, very much a good movie in that sense. I also very much enjoyed the gore in this movie. Very, very gruesome. Nothing is really blurred out. You see all of it right in your face. You get really close camera angles of all these dismembered bodies, rotting bodies, all these torture victims, unfortunately, stuff like that. So it's very, very gruesome, very intense. Definitely kind of makes you have like that pit in your stomach. So I think imagery was done very well in terms of that. Again, really selling you on this kind of documentary style. Now, typically in documentaries, all these imagery would most likely be blurred out or not shown to this extreme. So that kind of also helps you differentiate whether this is a fake movie or like a fake documentary or a real documentary. But even there, so it still sells you on that aspect, especially because how gruesome these imagery are. And a lot of it comes from security cam footage or body cams, or like the homicide when they come in and start taking pictures of the crime scene. So very close up, very gruesome, very nice practical effects in terms of like the makeup of these deceased people. So very much intense imagery, puts that pit in your stomach, really sells you on that documentary style. So I thought overall, in terms of like the horror aspect of it, where it comes from like just the gruesomeness of the intensity of these crime scenes, I think that was done very, very well. And I like pretty much all the actors here. No really recognizable faces, and I think that was done on purpose. When you look at on Google and stuff, you don't really get a cast list, and I think that's also kind of sell you the idea that this is like a documentary, very similar to kind of like the Blair Witch Project, where no one was really credited to make it seem more real. This kind of seems like they're trying to do the same thing. But overall, I think everybody did a good job. They felt like a person being interviewed for a documentary. They didn't seem just like very fake at most times. Overall, I think there's still some moments which we'll talk about later, but overall, I think especially like the cops and the detectives felt the most like raw and real and talked like someone would in a documentary, where they're trying to kind of say the right thing, but their emotions kind of get the better of them. They kind of sound scripted, but they have their own emotions that kind of spill out through their words and stuff. So I think overall it very much felt like that documentary style, and I think they did a great job in terms of acting as if they were actually being interviewed during a documentary. And I think the overall plot was actually very fun to follow, seeing this kind of goose chase of trying to piece all these things together, murders happening decades apart from each other. How are they connected? What is the motive? What are these symbols that we're finding? Like, this whole plot felt very, very genuine, very much like what a serial killer plot point would feel like in modern day. And I thought it was very fun to follow, very fun trying to piece things together. It was very eerie. A good plot. Nothing felt overly convoluted. Nothing felt too kind of out there, like it was too far of a reach. At least for the first, 2/3 of the movie, didn't feel like it was trying to reach too far out there. But overall, I very much enjoyed the plot, the way they really presented all the evidence, the way they presented, the serial killer and what motives could be at play here, or how the officers were involved and things like that. So I think overall you had a very solid through line through this entire movie, where you really have so much evidence kind of being shoveled at you at all times, where it didn't feel confusing and it felt like it all kind of made sense by the end of it. But overall, very fun, unique movie, something that I probably wouldn't watch too often. But in terms of the positives, I think it is a good watch, especially if you are into those documentary or true crime style types of stories. But with that being said, let's go ahead and get into my cons. And start with my cons. I've kind of spoken a little bit, but in terms of the actors who are being interviewed, for the better half or 2/3 of the movie, it felt very genuine, very much realistic of what someone would really sound like when being interviewed at a documentary, or in a documentary, I should say. But towards the end, for whatever reason, I'm not sure if it was just the writing or they were kind of running out of material, how to kind of talk about these crime scenes, but it started to get a little kind of off or a little silly, the way they kind of delivered some of these lines, or like the quotes they wanted to bring up, or whatever the case may be. It did start to feel a little off or a little silly, where it felt too scripted. And documentaries most of the time are pretty scripted, but this just felt overly scripted, where it just didn't come off genuine, or it didn't come off naturally. It felt a little off, just the wording, the delivery. For again, most parts, it did feel a little silly. And speaking of being a little silly, I think the concept and the motivations of this serial killer at first felt very interesting. It felt like there was no connection between these people, and you're just in this just wild goose hunt of why are these people being selected, and it just felt very strange. And then you ultimately start to kind of peel back the layers of these, like, it starts getting into like astrology and the planets being aligned a certain way, and there might be some sort of like interdimensional being or god that he's trying to summon or something like that. It doesn't delve too deep into it, but I just don't like the way they kind of executed it. It felt like people were being chosen at random. It felt like they were really trying to sell the idea that what he was doing is actually real, and there are consequences. It's not just some person that is part of a cult and just believes it because someone told him to believe it, and he just lives that way. And it made it seem like all the things he was doing was really leading to some sort of catastrophic thing happening in terms of like space and the stars aligning and the planets aligning. So it it really had me for the first half, that it was very, very interesting, really trying to figure out what is going on, but left me out with like a sour note where it was like, oh, that was a little too weird. And some people can probably appreciate that, and I'm sure a lot of people would find that very interesting and very appealing, that it took that kind of big swing. But I do wish it ended things off a little bit more grounded. Now, they don't go too far-fetched and fully blatantly say, oh yeah, like this is real, satanic rituals or things like that. It never really full on says that, but it definitely kind of implies it. And I do wish it just kind of ended a little bit more of a grounded note. And the serial killer himself, I do wish we got to learn a little bit more about him. Even one of the interviewers says it himself, that he wished he had the chance to interview him in this fake scenario, of course. But again, I do wish we learned a little bit more about him. It felt like he was kind of motiveless. There was no rhyme or reason for picking these certain people or anything like that. So I just wish we got a little bit more deeper into it. And again, you leave in a very sour note where it ends up being a little too silly, too paranormal. And then we also don't get the satisfaction of realizing how this person started doing this in the first place, why he started doing it in the first place, or what was the exact motive in the picking of these people. So I do wish we got a little bit more information, and instead of being left out in the dark. And I just wish we got a little more information about the serial killer himself. But overall, this is a fun movie, especially, like I said, again, if you are into those true crime documentary style stuff. I think it's very much a great watch. Don't necessarily think you need to rush out to the movie theaters to watch this. Is definitely something that you could wait for streaming, and that's probably where I'll put it at, because it's overall a good movie, but not something that is going to be revolutionary when it comes to the horror genre. But again, if you guys like Tom Movie, TV shows, or video game related, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button. I'll see you guys on the next video. Thank you.